What do you think determines your behavior? Do you think you consciously decide everything that you do? That you consciously decide each and every action that you take in a day? Or maybe do you think that you are the product of your childhood, like psychotherapy, that what happened in your childhood predetermined who you are, and now you are just a slave to those events? Or maybe you think your actions are the product of your environment, your culture, the people around you, what happens, the events. Well, all of these are true and they are also false. And let's take them one by one. The idea that you consciously decide each thing that you do is, I think, at the heart of our feeling of free will, because if you don't decide what you do, then you don't really have free will, and this leads you to the trap of determinism, of thinking that what you do is predetermined by other things and that you have no power to change. But in fact, you don't consciously decide what you do, and yet you have the power to change. Because I want you now to think of all the actions that you do in a regular day. Yes, like what you do in the morning, your route to work, your habits at work, at lunch, what you do after work, and each and every tiny decision that you make, like taking a left or a right, or responding with empathy or with anger when someone else is acting emotionally. And if you think of all these actions, you realize that of all the actions that you do, actually more than 99% of them are repetitive actions, because 99% of the time how we decide what we do is to identify the situation that we are in and match it with a situation from the past. Even if it's not the same situation, we match it with a similar situation. So when maybe your partner is angry at you, you match that situation with all the situations in the past when someone was angry at you, and you repeat the behavior that you did in the past. So if in, I don't know, 1,000 situations in the past when someone was angry at you, in 900 of them you responded with anger back, then you are very, very, very likely to respond with anger when your partner becomes angry at you today. And this identify and match happens unconsciously. So your unconscious identifies and matches the situations from the past. And this has a very good reason from a survival standpoint, because in the wild, in the Stone Age, you didn't have time to analyze each situation from ground zero. You needed to act quickly, and the best evidence that a behavior was good for you was that you did it in the past and you survived. So this meant that it is proven and that your unconscious really wants to repeat it, because it was to minimize the risk, and doing something new is always risky. So that is why you repeat your past actions. You consciously decide only one of things that happen once and that don't repeat. Like when you decide maybe who to marry, although that actually is a decision that is created by lots of small decisions until then. Or maybe the decision what car to buy, or where to move. The long, logical, hard decisions that you make by analyzing step by step risks and the benefits. Now, the second idea, that you are determined by your childhood. Yes and no, because your unconscious has a model of the world, like a map of the world, on which it bases its decisions and its matching. And this map is more or less predetermined. So for all of us, it is mostly the map of the world as it was in the Stone Age, because 95% of human Homo sapiens history was spent in the Stone Age. Out of 200,000 years, we have agriculture and states and settlements and property for about 10,000 years, which is 5%. So that's a big part of the model that your unconscious uses. But it's not a fixed model, it's also adaptive, and it's not equally adaptive. So in childhood, it is the most flexible and the most adaptive to what happens, because childhood is when human beings learn the map of the world and how to behave to survive. And they learn by experimenting, but a lot from seeing what others do and what others say. So after childhood, the model becomes more rigid, more inflexible, resistant to change. And that is why what happens in childhood has a very big impact on the map of the world that your unconscious uses to decide what you do, and that even you consciously use. But it's not fixed. So although after childhood the model becomes more rigid, and although in time it becomes even more rigid, this is part of the brain's neuroplasticity. So it becomes more rigid because repeating the same behaviors means you repeat the same patterns of neural activation, which means those pathways become more entrenched. But neuroplasticity also means that you can change these pathways. So it is possible to consciously decide to change your model of the world by integrating new knowledge, by choosing to look at other models, by implementing techniques to interrupt the unconscious behavior loops. So it's always possible to change the model from childhood. And last but not least, that you are the product of your environment. Yes, but as we talked, you are more the product of the environment of Homo sapiens in the Stone Age, which is very, very different from the environment we have created for ourselves now. And this discrepancy is actually a big part of our problems, because we make bad decisions because we have a bad model, like eating sugar anytime we have the opportunity. Besides this, of course, there's the adaptation to the current environment, but that happens mostly by looking at what other people do rather than adapting, really adapting from ground zero to the environment that you are in. If a human being was actually tabula rasa and could adapt to the environment from scratch without all of this baggage, let's say, this ingrained model, then I think that human being would behave very, very differently than we behave now. So there you have it. A lot of what you do is determined by other factors, not decided consciously by you. And if you don't do anything, this will continue happening and you will find yourself a prisoner in your own life. And if you have this feeling, if you want to change but cannot, then go to avantgardesavage.com. You have a free session with me in which can talk about how you can change your life, how you can regain control of your behavior and become who you want to be.